I'm 70 years old, and one morning I opened a letter from the bank. Your money was sent to another account. My hands shook. My stomach dropped. I had never changed my account. Something was terribly wrong. In an instant, the memory hit me, the dinner table papers sliding across the wood, my daughter-in-law's steady hand pushing the pen toward me. Her voice still echoes, "Dad, sign this. It guarantees income for life." They called it a reverse mortgage. I signed, trusting my family. But when the money vanished, the truth was brutal. It never reached me. And that's when I realized my worst enemy wasn't a stranger. It was my own family. Would you ever sign your house away if your own blood asked you, "Has anything like this ever happened in your family?" Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if this story hits close to home, please like the video and subscribe for more. When people look at me now, they see an old man with silver hair and a slower step. What they don't see is the rhythm I still keep inside my life. I keep a pill organizer on the kitchen counter, each little square filled exactly for the week. Every morning I click one open at 7 sharp. My Medicare appointment notes are taped neatly on the fridge with a magnet shaped like the Statue of Liberty. Next to it, the property tax letter for the apartment already marked paid. I do these things not because I'm obsessive, but because I want no one to mistake me for confused or forgetful. I'm not losing my mind. My apartment is the crown jewel of my life's labor. 2 bedrooms on the 12th floor with a narrow balcony that looks over Manhattan's skyline. At night, the lights glitter like broken glass across the river. I still remember the day my wife and I stepped inside for the first time. She held my hand and whispered, "Bill, we finally did it." For decades, we had rented, scraped, and saved. Owning this place was proof that our sacrifices meant something. Life here carries its rituals. On Sunday mornings, I brew coffee strong enough to wake the whole floor. Ramirez, my neighbor across the hall, comes over with his domino set and we play, while the Yankees game buzzes faintly on the TV. On the 4th of July, families gather on the rooftop for barbecue and cheap beer, kids running in circles while fireworks split the sky. I still keep old Polaroids of those nights, my wife laughing, neighbors raising plastic cups, smoke curling into the summer air. She passed away 10 years ago, but the chair she used to sit in during those rooftop nights still rests broken on the balcony. I've never had the heart to throw it away. Ramirez often says, "Bill, this building isn't just bricks and pipes, it's memory. Don't let anyone take that from you." His words sink deeper now. My son Daniel is 42. He used to be a lively boy who'd run the bases at Little League games while I cheered from the bleachers. Life hasn't been kind to him. A car accident years back left him with medical bills stacked like towers. Credit cards swallowed him whole. He tries, but debt clings to him like a shadow. I remember the night at the hospital. Machines beeped his body wrapped in tubes and bruises. The nurse asked about insurance. I didn't hesitate. I drained half of my retirement to pay the bills. Looking at him lying there pale but breathing, I thought, he'll never forget this. One day, he'll take care of me. For years after I held on to that faith, even when the bills kept coming, even when his eyes grew tired and his shoulders stooped from stress, I believed my son would protect me the way I had protected him. Then came Melissa, my daughter-in-law, sharp in every way, a white-collar worker with pressed suits, her phone always buzzing. She speaks with confidence as if every word were typed in a corporate email before leaving her lips. Her catchphrase, the one she uses in every argument, is "for everyone's safety." To her, safety means control. She married Daniel 7 years ago. At first I thought she was good for him, organized, steady. But slowly I noticed the tilt in their conversations. She always took the lead. He always nodded, deferred, shrank a little smaller. The night everything shifted was supposed to be a quiet family dinner. Ramirez had dropped by earlier with leftover empanadas, and I set them on the counter while waiting for Daniel and Melissa. When they arrived, Melissa was carrying a leather folder instead of dessert. That folder sat on the table between us like an uninvited guest. We ate in awkward silence until she slid the folder open. Inside were papers neatly clipped. She pushed them across the table toward me with a practiced smile. "Dad," she said, using this word with careful sweetness, "this is a reverse mortgage. It's safe, guaranteed income for life. You don't have to worry about bills or emergencies anymore." Daniel sat beside her, head lowered eyes darting between me and the papers. He didn't speak, but his hand gently nudged the pen closer. I hesitated, running my fingers over the paper. The words blurred. Mortgage, lien, lifetime payments. It sounded like another language. Melissa leaned in her tone, calm but firm. Everyone wins here. You get money every month. We can help manage it. It's simple, Dad. All you have to do is sign. I looked at Daniel. For a flicker of a moment, I thought I saw the boy from Little League, the boy who once looked at me with unshakable trust. My chest ached. I picked up the pen, and in that instant a memory returned years ago, sitting with Daniel on the couch watching a Yankees game. He had put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Don't worry, Dad. I'll take care of you one day." Now, as the pen hovered above the paper, those words echoed bitter and hollow. I signed. Not because I believed Melissa, not because I understood every line. I signed because my son was there, silent but waiting. And I wanted peace, even if it cost me more than I knew. The night after I signed those papers, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window listening to the city hum beneath me. Horns, sirens, footsteps, all the sounds of New York moving forward while I felt stuck in place. The folder still lay on the kitchen counter. I hadn't even tucked it away. It glared at me under the dim light, a silent witness to my hesitation. I tried to convince myself I had done the right thing. Reverse mortgage, guaranteed income. Melissa's voice repeated it like a commercial jingle, but something inside me wouldn't rest. My stomach churned with unease. The next morning I brewed coffee as usual, hoping the routine would steady me. Ramirez knocked on the door, domino box in hand. He noticed the folder on the counter and raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" he asked. "Just some paperwork Melissa brought," I muttered. He didn't press, but the way his eyes lingered told me he sensed my discomfort. We played dominoes in silence, though neither of us really kept score that morning. Later that day, Daniel called. His voice was strained, rushed. "Dad, did you get the notification yet?" "The first payment should come soon." I frowned. "Notification?" "Yeah, the direct deposit." Melissa set it up. "Don't worry, it's handled." Something about his tone unsettled me. He was too eager, too insistent. That evening I taped another note to the fridge, check bank statement, a reminder to myself, though I hardly needed it. A week passed. Every day I opened my account online. Every day it was the same balance, unchanged. No deposit. Then one morning as I sliced bread for breakfast, the mail slipped under my door. Among the envelopes was one from the bank. I tore it open. "Funds have been redirected to the account ending in 8724. I froze. That wasn't my account. My heart hammered in my chest. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the letter into my coffee. Redirected. Redirected to whose account? I dialed Daniel. He answered on the second ring. "Dad." "Daniel, the letter. It says the funds went to another account, not mine." There was silence, a long, heavy silence. Then he said softly, "Dad, Melissa thought it would be easier this way. We can manage the payments, make sure everything's covered." My mouth went dry. "So the money, it isn't even coming to me, it's still for you," he insisted, his voice quickening. "We'll give you what you need. This way nothing gets messed up." I felt my chest tighten. "Daniel, that's not what I agreed to. I didn't sign to lose control. I signed because I trusted you." He didn't answer. In the silence I heard Melissa's voice faintly in the background, sharp, instructive. I hung up without saying goodbye. That night I sat at the kitchen table, the bank letter spread before me, the words blurring through the tears in my eyes. I thought about all the years I had worked double shifts, skipped meals, saved every dime. All of it for this apartment, for Daniel, for our future. And now it felt like sand slipping through my fingers. Melissa arrived later that week unannounced. She placed another set of papers on the table, her smile crisp as ever. "Dad, these are just confirmations, routine stuff. It keeps everything moving smoothly." I looked at her, really looked. Her nails polished, her suit pressed, her expression unyielding. She spoke as if this was all already decided. "I'm not comfortable signing this right now," I said firmly. Her smile faltered, just slightly. "It's just paperwork. Don't overthink it," she replied, tapping the pen against the table. "We need this done for everyone's safety." That phrase again. For everyone's safety. I pushed the pen back across the table. "Not tonight." Her eyes narrowed. For the first time, the sweetness dropped from her voice. "Dad, you don't want to make this harder than it needs to be." Daniel sat beside her silent, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. He didn't look at me. I felt the tension knotting in the room. My own son, the boy who once promised to take care of me, sat wordless while his wife pressed me for more signatures. I stood slowly, my chair scraping the floor. I said, "Not tonight." Melissa gathered the papers with a snap, her jaw tight. She slipped them back into her leather folder and stood. "Fine, but don't wait too long. These things have deadlines." When they left, I locked the door behind them and leaned against it, my breath shaking. My apartment, my sanctuary, suddenly felt like enemy territory. That night, I couldn't escape the thought I wasn't just fighting paperwork. I was fighting my own family. I came to New York with a duffel bag, a union number on a napkin, and hands ready to work. At 23, I rented a mattress in a room that smelled of old coffee. At dawn, I joined the line outside a job trailer hoping to be picked. Some days I hauled cinder blocks 12 floors. Other days I shoveled gravel. At night, I slept with grit in my teeth and a promise in my head: one day, I'll stand in a place that belongs to me. Anna was a cashier at a corner store 2 subway stops away. She wore a bandana and kept peppermints by the register. I bought one just to hear her laugh. On my days off, we walked the river and made plans. "Someday we'll have a window big enough to watch the sky," she said. "A place where the walls remember us." We started in a railroad apartment with a tub in the kitchen and a landlord who fixed leaks with duct tape. On payday, we spread coupons across the floor. At night, she folded strangers' laundry and brought home little envelopes, $20.30 if business was good. For the future, she'd whisper, sliding them into a shoebox we called the bank. When the super raised rent, we moved across town in a borrowed shopping cart. When a boss lost my overtime slips, I brought my own pen the next day. We stacked small victories: a secondhand sofa, a fan to push the heat out, a street photo of us grinning. In 1985, we found the apartment 2 bedrooms on the 12th floor, a sliver of balcony wide enough for 2 chairs and a plant. The hallway paint was chipped, the buzzer stuck, but the window framed Manhattan like a postcard. Anna squeezed my hand. I was already placing our plates in those cupboards, and her laughter inside those walls. The down payment emptied our shoebox and my snow-shoveling money from 3 winters. We signed with pens that shook, then lay on the floor eating lo mein because the furniture wouldn't arrive until morning. Anna raised a plastic fork like a champagne flute. "To a place that remembers us," she said. I answered, "To a place no landlord can take." We built a home with patience and pride. Anna hung red curtains from a church sale and lined shelves with floral paper. I learned to patch drywall from a retired painter 2 floors down. We bought mugs that didn't match and called them a collection. On Sundays, I brewed coffee so strong Ramirez across the hall swore he could smell it through his peephole. Our doors stayed half open. That's how community starts. Daniel arrived on a rainy Tuesday, small, loud, perfect. The nurse placed him in Anna's arms and the world went soft. She pressed her forehead to his and whispered, "Safe." We carried that word home like a blessing. On the bedroom doorframe, I made a pencil mark at his first birthday and promised to add one each year. The marks are still there: 1988, 1990, 1993, climbing like a ladder he left behind. The apartment learned our rhythms: birthday candles, Christmas cinnamon rolls, Little League uniforms drying over the radiator. During a thunderstorm, Daniel rode his bike down the hallway and crashed into the wall. The dent still looks like a moon crater. Anna pretended to scold him while tapping my arm for a bandage. After he fell asleep, we laughed and woke him again. Not everything was easy. I took overtime whenever it was offered. Knees aching, I climbed scaffolds in winter winds. Some nights the numbers at the kitchen table didn't add up. We argued in whispers how to pay the electric, whether we could afford new shoes. But even our fights ended with fingers laced and a promise to keep going. Years later, safety became a hospital word. Cancer turned our calendar into appointment slips held by fridge magnets. Anna kept stirring soup even when her hands shook. When her hair fell out, she wrapped her bandana and said, "See, I'm still me." I worked double shifts and learned new prayers in elevator corners. Hope stretched thin until it broke. The night she died, the apartment sounded wrong. The fridge hummed too loud. The clock ticked like it was counting down. I stared at the plate she'd set for herself out of habit. I couldn't move it for a week. When I finally slid her chair in, I did it slowly, like tucking a child into bed. Grief moved into the spare bedroom and refused to pay rent. I tried to be both father and mother to Daniel. I burned dinners, forgot picture day, learned to stitch a loose button. He grew tall. The pencil marks climbed. I told him about the shoebox bank, the church sale curtains, the first night on the floor with lo mein. I wanted him to see the apartment not as square footage, but as proof that two stubborn people could turn work into a life. When Daniel was 26, a car ran a red light and folded his sedan like paper. Hospital lights were too bright. Waiting room coffee tasted like pennies. He slept under a tangle of tubes while a billing clerk asked about insurance. I withdrew savings with hands that didn't feel like mine and wrote checks from an account I'd promised Anna I wouldn't touch. Retirement could wait. My son could not. He healed slowly, stubborn as his mother, but the bills kept arriving in white drifts. I paid what I could, then more than I could. Protecting him felt like protecting the promise Anna and I made over that plastic fork toast family first. When he met Melissa, I wanted to believe life had turned a corner. She was organized, polished, a problem solver. At our first dinner, she kept her phone face down but within reach. When it buzzed, she smiled an apology without picking it up. I thought maybe this is good. Maybe Daniel needs steady. Holidays at their place felt like stepping into a magazine catered turkey soy candles guests who discussed markets and mergers. When I told a story about the radiator or the night of the fireworks, Melissa smiled, nodded once, and changed the subject. She never asked about Anna ever. Sometimes I wondered whether she noticed the Polaroids on my fridge or the pencil ladder on the doorframe. If she did, she never said. Still, I kept faith. Years earlier, during a Yankees game, Daniel put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Don't worry, Dad. I'll take care of you one day." I stored that sentence like a spare key. Faith is a good blanket until it catches fire. Coming home with groceries, I heard Melissa whisper in the hallway, "Do you realize how much equity is sitting here? It's irresponsible not to use it." Daniel's reply came small and tired. "Melissa, not now. Please." I stood behind the stairwell door and felt the building tilt, not because of the word equity, but because my son sounded like a man already surrendering. After that hallway whisper, I noticed how Melissa looked at my place. Not with the soft focus people save for memories, but with measuring eyes, square footage comps potential. She complimented the light and the view in a tone that sounded like a listing. When she visited, she straightened the mail pile, lined up the salt and pepper, and suggested updates I hadn't asked for. We could modernize this and double the value, she said, wiping a counter that was already clean. Daniel said nothing. He rubbed his forehead and looked at the floor. I don't think my son meant harm. Dad had trained him to live inside a corner. After the accident, money became a bruise that wouldn't fade. He spoke in minimum payments and due dates. He called me when a card was late, not when life was calm. Each time I helped, I told myself I was keeping the promise I'd made beside Anna's hospital bed, keep Daniel safe, even from himself. Time turned our building into a village. Kids learned to ride scooters in the hallway. Mrs. Green on 9 kept butterscotch for anyone who said hello. On Sundays, Ramirez and I played dominoes with the Yankees murmuring on TV. His wife died not long after Anna. Grief taught us silence. Sometimes he'd say, "Remember when the lobby was that terrible yellow?" and we'd laugh until our eyes watered. Memory pays in laughter when money can't. I tried not to become a man who mistrusts everything new. I bought a smartphone with letters large enough to read. I learned to check my bank account online even if I preferred paper. I taped Medicare notes to the fridge with a Statue of Liberty magnet and kept my property tax bill stamped paid. These rituals weren't about control. They were proof I was still careful, still capable. Then came the dinner that turned safety into paperwork. The leather folder, the firm smile, the pen nudged toward my hand. Melissa's voice was syrup over a hard edge. "It's safe, guaranteed, everyone wins." Daniel sat beside her, eyes lowered, fingers folding a napkin into smaller and smaller triangles. I asked clumsy questions. She answered quickly as if the deal were already done. She used my name sparingly, but the word safety often. When she reached out and pushed the pen closer, I thought of Daniel at 10, pressing his small hand against mine during a Yankees game and promising, "I'll take care of you one day." I signed. For a few days, I pretended the signature bought calm. I brewed coffee, played dominoes, checked the mail, and waved to the doorman. But the folder on the counter glowed like a hazard light. I woke at night and saw its corner catching moonlight. My stomach twisted. The bank letter ended the pretending, "Your money was sent to another account." I stood at the sink and felt the room tilt. I called Daniel. He answered like a man picking up a hot pot. It's still for you, he said. We'll make sure you have what you need. We manage need. Words that sound like help until you notice where the door lock's from. That night I laid the letter and the first page of the contract on the table and set 3 photographs above them like witnesses. Anna laughing on the rooftop, Daniel at 10 with frosting on his chin, Ramirez and me with dominoes between us. I asked the room the question I'd avoided. If I lose this place, what exactly do I have left? Backstory isn't nostalgia, it's a ledger. Mine holds a red curtain from a church sale, a broken chair I can't throw away. Pencil marks marching up a doorframe over time, slip soup simmering prayers whispered between floors. It adds up to meaning that doesn't fit on a line labeled equity. Ramirez knocked the next morning. He read my face, closed the door, and didn't open the domino box. Did you read the deposit destination, he asked. I showed him the letter. He exhaled and said, paper is power, Bill. Once you sign, it's hard to take it back. Not impossible. Then he told me quietly about a call he'd overheard in the stairwell. Melissa laughing, telling someone, with this contract, the apartment is practically ours. He's old. He won't even notice. The words landed like stones. The hallway seemed to tilt. I called Daniel again. I need time, I said. We'll talk later, he replied. It's complicated, Dad. Complicated is a word people use when the truth is heavy and they don't want to carry it. I understood the weight. I didn't accept the dodge. That afternoon, Melissa arrived with a fresh stack and a soft voice. She set the papers down and without a glance at Anna's photo said, "We're only doing this for you. It's for your safety." Then she pushed the pen toward me with 2 manicured fingers. I placed my hand over the pen not to take it but to stop it from moving. "Not today," I said. Her smile thinned. After she left, I made coffee I didn't drink and walked the apartment barefoot, reading the grain of the wood like a palm. In the bedroom, I rested my hand on the doorframe ladder of pencil marks. In the kitchen, I stood by Anna's chair and let the quiet fill with her voice. On the balcony, I breathed the city like medicine. Then I said the sentence I had avoided no. I said it to the air, to the photos, to the contract, to myself. The word wasn't loud, but it belonged to me. That's where my backstory ends and the fight begins. Everything that comes next, letters, witnesses, hard choices, only makes sense if you know the math that lives behind my front door. My past is the reason my answer changed from a shaky yes to a steady no. And before the fight truly started, I stood by the table, looked at Anna's picture, and repeated the promise I made at her bedside long ago. I'll protect what we built, no matter what it costs me. For a few days after signing, I tried to breathe like nothing had changed. I brewed my coffee, played dominoes with Ramirez, and told myself the deposit would arrive soon. Reverse mortgage, guaranteed income for life. That was the promise. Every morning I logged into my bank account with my oversized phone. Each time the balance stared back unchanged. At first I thought maybe the system was slow. Banks always take their time, but as the days piled up, so did the silence in my account. Then came the letter. A thin white envelope slipped under my door like a paper knife. I slid it open with trembling fingers. Inside. Funds have been redirected to the account ending in 8724. My heart dropped. That was not my account. The walls felt closer, the air heavier. I checked the number twice, 3 times, but it didn't change. Redirected. Redirected where I called Daniel immediately. My voice shook. "Daniel, the bank says the money went to another account, not mine." Silence. I heard him breathing, maybe glancing at Melissa. Finally he said, "Dad, it's okay. Melissa thought it would be easier this way." "Easier," I snapped. "Easier for who?" "That's my account, my money." Melissa's voice cut in faintly from the background, calm, professional, like she was on a conference call. "It's safer if we manage it. This way, nothing gets lost, nothing gets confused. We'll give you what you need." My chest burned. Give me what I need. I signed for support, not for control. That money was supposed to come to me. Daniel sighed heavy, defeated. "Dad, it's still for you. We'll handle it. Don't stress." I clenched the letter so tight it crumpled in my hand. "Daniel, I didn't raise you to handle me like a bill." He said nothing. I imagined him sitting there, head down, Melissa's eyes drilling into him, guiding every word. That night I spread the papers across my table. The numbers blurred through my tears. I remembered every brick I'd carried every night. Anna and I went without to buy this place, every promise I made to keep it safe. And now my money flowed somewhere else, controlled by hands, not my own. Melissa showed up the next evening unannounced. She stepped inside as if the apartment already belonged to her. A leather folder tucked under her arm, her heels clicking against the wood floor. She smiled sweetly, sat at the table, and placed a set of confirmation forms in front of me. "Dad, these are just routine. Everything's set up. This will keep things running smoothly." I pushed the papers back. "Melissa, the funds are not coming to me. They're going to your account." Her smile didn't waver. "Technically to Daniel's. That way we can manage bills, emergencies, whatever you need. It's efficient." "Efficient?" My voice cracked. "This isn't efficiency. This is theft dressed in paperwork." For the first time, her expression shifted. Just a flicker, a tightening around the mouth. "Don't use words like that, Dad. We're family. We're protecting you, protecting me." Those words stung worse than any insult. Daniel sat in the corner, silent, shoulders hunched. I turned to him. "Daniel, is this true? Did you agree to this?" He nodded slowly, eyes glued to the floor. "It's just easier this way." The same phrase, as if rehearsed, as if she had fed him the lines. I felt the room spin. The boy who once promised during a Yankees game, "I'll take care of you one day," was now standing by while his wife drained the very lifeline from my hands. Melissa leaned forward, her voice dropping lower, firmer. "Dad, you don't have to worry about a thing anymore. We'll make sure you're taken care of. Isn't that what you always wanted?" I stared at her, then at my son. The silence stretched like a canyon. My throat tightened, my pulse hammered in my ears. "No," I said at last, my voice steady. "What I always wanted was respect." She blinked, taken aback, then slid the folder shut with a snap. "Think about it. But don't wait too long. Deadlines matter." When they left the apartment, exhaled with me. I sat in Anna's empty chair, the letter trembling in my hand. I whispered into the stillness, "Anna, they've turned your legacy into their account." The city outside buzzed on, indifferent. But inside these walls, a war had begun. Put yourself in my shoes. If your own child redirected your money, would you forgive, or would you fight back? Tell me in the comments. Your voice matters here. The next morning, I made copies of the contract at the corner print shop. The clerk didn't ask questions, but I caught him eyeing me, an old man fumbling with paper that looked too official. I slid the copies into an envelope and walked back slowly, every step heavier than the last. That afternoon, Ramirez knocked dominoes in hand as usual. I invited him in, poured coffee neither of us touched. Instead, I spread the papers across the table. His eyes scanned the fine print, his brow furrowing deeper line by line. Finally, he set the pages down. "Bill, this isn't right. You're locked in, but the account, look here, it doesn't even list you as primary." I swallowed hard. I thought maybe I misunderstood. But the bank letter. Ramirez leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I heard something, Bill. I wasn't going to say, but you need to know. Last week in the stairwell, I heard Melissa on the phone with someone sounded like a broker. She said, 'With this contract, the apartment is practically ours. He's old, he won't even notice.'" The words hit like a fist. My stomach clenched, my hands shook. Practically ours. Not family, not support, ownership. Ramirez touched my arm gently. "I know you trust Daniel, but you need to see what's happening." That evening, Daniel and Melissa came by. Melissa carried another folder, sleek and heavy. She smiled as though nothing was wrong, as though betrayal could be dressed in politeness. She sat at the kitchen table, unfolded the papers, and looked me square in the eye. "Dad, we're only doing this for you. You'll be safe. No late bills, no mistakes. You can relax." Her voice was honey, but her hands betrayed her. She slid the pen across the table, deliberate, pushing it toward me. "If you really loved us, you'd sign this without hesitation." The words froze me. Love twisted into leverage. Daniel sat stiff beside her, his knuckles white around the chair. I turned to him. "Daniel, is this what you want?" He bit his lip, eyes glistening. Finally, his voice cracked. "Dad, I only wanted to pay off debts. I thought it was temporary. I never meant..." Melissa's eyes flashed. She cut him off with a sharp glance, but he broke anyway. Tears slid down his face. "I didn't know it would go this far." My throat burned. "Temporary, I drained my savings for your hospital bills. I worked overtime until my knees gave out. I believed you when you said you'd take care of me, and now you let her treat me like a signature, like I'm in the way." The silence in the room was suffocating. My voice shook but grew louder. "You were supposed to protect this home. Instead, you sold me out." Daniel sobbed quietly, his face buried in his hands. Melissa's tone hardened. "You don't understand how expensive life is in this city. We're drowning in bills while you sit on untapped value. This isn't betrayal, it's survival." I stared at her, at the arrogance in her eyes, at the coldness that refused to see me as anything more than an obstacle. Ramirez, who had slipped in quietly after hearing raised voices, finally spoke from the doorway. "Survival doesn't sound like plotting in stairwells, Senora. I heard you. You weren't talking about safety. You were talking about taking." Melissa's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but no words came. I pushed the pen back across the table, my voice steady. "No, not another line, not another signature." Daniel looked up at me, tears cutting paths down his cheeks. "Dad, I'm sorry. I wanted to reach for him to gather the broken boy inside the man, but the wound was too raw." My chest ached with both fury and grief. Melissa snapped the folder shut. "You're making a mistake. Deadlines matter. Opportunities expire." I rose slowly, leaning on the table for strength. "Then let it expire. I'd rather lose money than lose my dignity." The folder disappeared into her bag. The door slammed behind them. Silence fell heavy. I sank into Anna's old chair, clutching the edge as if it might steady me. Ramirez sat across his eyes, kind but firm. "Bill, this isn't just family trouble. It's fraud. You need to be ready." I nodded faintly, though my mind raced. Betrayal had crossed the threshold. The battle was no longer about love. It was about survival of another kind. If you were in my place, your child crying, admitting guilt while their spouse pushed for control, would you forgive or would you draw the line? I want to hear your thoughts in the comment. The night after the confrontation, I sat at the kitchen table long after the city had gone quiet. The folder was gone. The shouting had ended, but the silence felt heavier than any noise. My hands rested on the wood scarred by decades of meals arguments and laughter. The grain seemed to carry the voices of my past, and they spoke louder than the betrayal still ringing in my ears. Anna's chair stood empty across from me. For 10 years it had been empty, but tonight the emptiness was sharper, cutting deep. I could almost see her hand smoothing the tablecloth, her voice humming while soup simmered on the stove. She would have known what to say. She always did. I whispered into the quiet, "Anna, I tried. I thought trusting them was the same as loving them, but trust feels like a weapon in their hands." The refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked. I sat with those sounds until they felt like witnesses. When I closed my eyes, memories flickered. Daniel as a child, asleep with chocolate frosting on his chin. Anna hanging Polaroids with magnets. Ramirez knocking with his domino box. These were the stitches that held this place together. Without them, the apartment was only drywall and rent receipts. With them, it was a story. My story. Our story. Now that story felt endangered, like pages being torn out behind my back. I thought of Daniel's tears, his voice breaking. I thought it was temporary. He hadn't raised his voice against Melissa, but he had cracked just for a moment, enough for me to glimpse the boy I once knew. Was that enough to forgive? Or was forgiveness just another form of surrender? I pressed my forehead to the cool wood of the table. The question gnawed at me. Was silence strength, or was it cowardice? I had chosen silence when Melissa first pushed the papers toward me. I signed because I didn't want to fight, because I wanted peace. But what did peace buy me? Money, redirected control, stolen dignity, bruised. Ramirez's words circled back. Paper is power, yes. And silence is permission. Still, part of me longed for quiet. I was tired of arguments, tired of explaining myself, tired of being measured as old. Would it be so wrong to let them manage it, to drift into the background while they handled the noise of bills and banks? Would that be weakness or wisdom? But then I thought of Anna, of the night on the balcony when the AC broke and she whispered, "We're safe." She hadn't meant money in a bank account. She meant dignity, choice, a life we built without begging. If I surrendered now, I wouldn't just lose an apartment. I would lose the last piece of Anna, the last piece of myself. I rose from the table and walked the apartment in the dark. My hand brushed the pencil marks on the bedroom doorframe. My fingers traced the dent in the hallway from Daniel's bike crash. My shadow crossed the red curtains Anna hung from a church sale. Every corner told me this isn't just property, it's memory carved into wood and wall. I stopped at the balcony looking out at Manhattan's skyline glittering like 1,000 open eyes. Somewhere down there, Melissa saw only numbers, only equity. I saw life. I saw Anna's laughter, Daniel's childhood, Sunday mornings with dominoes and coffee. I whispered to the night, they think this is about money, but it's about memory, and I won't sell memory for survival. My chest felt lighter, though the war was far from over. Tell me, do you think silence is wisdom or is it weakness? Would you keep the peace or would you risk conflict to defend what matters? Share your thoughts below. I returned to the kitchen, pulled open the drawer where Anna used to keep stamps and envelopes and found her handwriting on an old grocery list. Milk, rice, coffee, don't forget bread. Such simple words, but they cut through me. She was gone, but her hand had once moved this pen across this paper inside these walls. I held the slip like scripture. How could I surrender the place that held these fragments? I sat back down and looked at the empty chair. My voice steadied. I promised you, Anna. I'll protect what we built, even if it means standing alone. For the first time in weeks, I felt clarity. Betrayal had broken something, but it had also awakened something harder in me. This fight wasn't only against Melissa or even against Daniel's weakness. It was against the temptation inside myself to give up. I folded the bank letter and slid it into a folder marked proof. Paper is power. If they wanted to fight on paper, I would fight with paper too. The morning after my longest night, I woke with a steadiness I hadn't felt in years. Grief had taught me how to endure. Betrayal was now teaching me how to act. I brewed coffee, spread the contract copies on the table, and dialed the bank number printed on my tax receipts. Not the one Melissa handed me. A woman with a calm voice confirmed what I already knew: the account receiving disbursements wasn't mine. When I asked, "Can that be changed?" she hesitated. "Under the current terms, sir, not without a refinance." A refinance. The word opened a door inside my chest. I set the phone down and stood for a long minute, palms flat on the table. All my life I had solved problems with my back lifting, hauling showing up in bad weather. This time the work was ink and patience. Paperwork had always felt like a maze built to tire old men out, but I knew mazes you put one hand on the wall and keep moving until daylight. I took out Anna's old checkbook, ran my thumb over the grooves of her handwriting, and reminded myself we learned to do hard things together. I could learn this too. I opened a fresh envelope, wrote down every number, every name, every date. If the fight was going to live on paper, then I would live there for a while. By noon, I was on the subway in my pressed shirt, the one Anna used to iron on Sunday mornings. Midtown swallowed me all glass and hurry, but I moved through it with purpose. At the branch office, a young loan officer greeted me with the kind of smile that expects an easy case. I gave her the opposite. I laid out the letter, the contract, and the history, the decades of overtime, the pencil ladder on the doorframe, the promises I'd made over a plastic fork. "I'm not confused," I said gently. "I am careful, and I need to put my name back where it belongs." She listened. She asked the right questions. She printed forms that smelled like fresh paper and pushed them toward me this time, not like a trap, but like a bridge. There were verifications, calls, signatures, a checklist that stretched the afternoon thin. When doubts crept in, I pictured Anna's chair and pushed the pen forward. By evening, the young woman slid a final set of papers across the desk. "This agreement terminates the previous disbursement arrangement," she said, tapping the signature line. "Disbursements will now deposit only to the account listed here in your name." I signed and the pen didn't shake. Outside, the Manhattan air felt warmer, the city noise more like music than a threat. I carried the folder like a shield. For the first time since Melissa had entered my kitchen with a leather smile, I felt taller than my fear. 2 nights later, Melissa returned with Daniel. She didn't wait to be invited in. The heels, the folder, the efficient smile, it was all the same choreography. She spread her papers on my table as if coronating herself. "Dad, this is urgent," she said, tone sweet but blade sharp. The deadline is tonight. If we don't finalize, opportunities disappear. I let the sentence hang in the room, then I placed my own folder beside hers. A different color, a different future. She frowned. What's that proof? I said, sliding the pages across. Your opportunity already disappeared. Her eyes moved line by line and the color drained from her face. The seals stared back at her like witnesses. Daniel leaned forward, brow knotted. Dad, what is this? It's me keeping my promise to your mother, I said, meeting his eyes for the first time in weeks. I refinanced. The money comes only to me now. Your account is out of the picture. Melissa shut her folder so hard the pen jumped. You can't just undo what we set up. You set it up without me, I answered. I'm simply putting my name back where it belongs. She tried one more tactic, the one that weaponizes concern. You'll get lost in paperwork, deadlines, compliance. There's a lot you don't understand at your age. Maybe I said. But any mistakes will be mine, not yours. For the first time, Daniel didn't look to her for permission to speak. He stared at the refinance seal, and something in his face broke open. He whispered, Dad, and then stopped, swallowed and tried again. Dad, I failed you. His voice grew steadier, but I won't let her take this home anymore. The room went quiet. Melissa's jaw tightened. You think a piece of paper saves you? She hissed. You're old and alone. This building will eat you alive. Ramirez, who had slipped in at my call and stood at the doorway with his arms folded, finally spoke. He's not alone. His voice carried the authority of 1,000 hallway hellos. This building remembers who shovels snow and who borrows sugar and never brings it back. Melissa gathered her folder in a flurry, but I lifted a hand. Before you go, I said, we're not doing this behind closed doors anymore. The next morning, I visited the building manager. Years of small kindnesses, signing for packages, replacing my mailbox key in an hour had earned me a hearing. I explained the confusion, the redirection, the refinance. He frowned, then picked up the phone. Let's get clarity in the open, he said. That afternoon, a notice appeared in the elevator resident meeting lobby, 6 p.m. My stomach fluttered like it used to before performance reviews at the job site. This wasn't my style, but I had learned that silence is permission, and I was done granting it. At 6, the lobby filled with the building's familiar orchestra strollers, squeaking mailboxes, clapping neighbors, murmuring. Mrs. Green brought a tin of butterscotch. A teenager filmed near the ficus. Ramirez stood at my side like a lighthouse. The building manager cleared his throat. Next to him stood a woman in a navy blazer with a bank badge. Daniel arrived first, eyes swollen from a war I couldn't see. Melissa followed, spine straight, smile rehearsed. She scanned the faces with the quick calculation of someone tallying a jury. The bank representative lifted a paper. Her voice was crisp. We're here to clarify the status of apartment 12B. As of yesterday, the previous disbursement arrangement is terminated. This residence is no longer subject to the reverse mortgage disbursement account that was in dispute. Mr. William Harris has completed a refinance and holds full control of all disbursements. Notices will be sent to him directly. For a heartbeat, the lobby was still. Then Ramirez started clapping. Mrs. Green joined. The sound gathered until it was a wave. I felt my face heat, not from pride so much as relief, as if the building itself had said, we see you. Melissa's smile thinned to a thread. This is highly irregular, she snapped. There are agreements in place. We'll be pursuing legal options. The manager raised a palm. Ma'am, the bank has spoken. She wheeled on Daniel low and fast. Are you just going to stand there? He looked at me, then at the neighbors, then back at her. Yes, he said quietly. I'm going to stand right here. Then louder to me so everyone could hear, Dad, I failed you, but I won't let her take this home anymore. A murmur rippled through the lobby, the human kind of verdict you can't file, but you can feel. Melissa lifted her phone like a gavel. We'll see what a judge thinks about that, Ramirez said, stepping forward with an unexpected calm. He pulled out his own phone, thumbed the screen, and the lobby filled with a voice we all recognized. Melissa's slick and triumphant, recorded in the stairwell days ago. With this contract, the apartment is practically ours. He's old. He won't even notice. The recording echoed against marble and mailboxes. Gasps, then a hush so complete you could hear the humming light. Melissa's face went white, then red. The manager's eyebrows climbed. The bank rep's mouth hardened into a line. That's illegal, Melissa sputtered. It's the truth, Ramirez replied. And if you're worried about legality, maybe worry about the part where you redirected an old man's money. The bank rep tucked her badge away. From our perspective, she said carefully, the matter is resolved. Any further disputes belong elsewhere. It was corporate for you lost. Melissa snapped her purse shut and pushed through the crowd. Her heels hammered the tile like an argument no one was listening to anymore. Daniel stayed rooted, hand on the back of a chair as if bracing for aftershocks. I put my palm on his shoulder. He didn't flinch. For the first time in a long time, we stood on the same ground. Peace didn't arrive in a parade. It came in little pieces: a quiet night, a clean mailbox, the way my heart stopped jumping at every knock. The refinance had locked the door. Melissa tried to pry open, and the lobby scene had closed it in front of witnesses. Still, battles leave echo marks. I wanted my home to feel like a sanctuary again, not a courthouse. So I did something that surprised even me. I decided to step back without stepping away. I met with the building manager and a local realtor I trusted, the kind who remembers birthdays and never pushes. We talked at the round table in the community room where kids do homework after school. I'm not selling, I said, but I want distance. I want peace. The realtor nodded. Then we listed for lease under your name, only long-term vetted tenants. You stay the owner. You hold the keys that matter. For the next week, my apartment transformed from battlefield to project. Ramirez helped me patch the hallway den into a story only I could still see. Mrs. Green insisted on bringing over a new welcome mat for good luck, she said, tucking butterscotch in my pocket. I boxed up Anna's Polaroids and her grocery list with the care of someone packing a museum exhibit. Not to erase our life, never that, but to protect it from the noise that had crept in. We scheduled showings. Prospective tenants admired the light, the view, the neighborhood bulletin board full of bake sales and lost cat flyers. A young teacher traced the doorframe pencil marks with a smile. Who grew up here? She asked. A boy who learned to ride a bike in the hallway, I said, and surprised myself by laughing. The application I chose belonged to a nurse who worked nights and an older couple who adored her rescue dog. Solid references, steady income, kind faces. We signed a lease at the round table under the fluorescent buzz that had witnessed 100 school projects. Leaseholder, William Harris. Term, 2 years renewable. Notes. Owner retains rights to inspect quarterly. No subletting, no third-party management. The building manager posted the required notice near the mailboxes. Leased Unit 12B owner, William Harris. The paper looked ordinary, but to me it gleamed. My name, my terms, my home, shared on purpose, not taken by scheme. Word travels fast in buildings like ours. That afternoon, as I pinned a spare copy to my door for the cleaners, I saw Melissa in the hallway. She must have come to try another angle or simply to see if the ground had shifted back beneath her feet. She stopped short at the paper. For a second, all the polish peeled away. Her mouth thinned, her eyes flashed. She read my name once, twice, as if repetition could edit reality. Then she turned on her heel and left. No speech, no folder, no pen. Daniel came by that evening. He stood inside the doorway like a boy, again hands in his pockets. I saw the notice, he said. Dad, I'm glad. His voice was thin but honest. I'm going to fix things one by one. I don't expect you to believe me yet. I believe you want to try, I said. It was more than I could have said a week earlier. He nodded. Eyes wet, and we stood quietly, 2 men counting damage and repairs. That night, alone in the apartment that was about to become someone else's home for a while, I made a small dinner and ate it at the kitchen table. I set Anna's chair out, not as a shrine, but as a seat saved for the life we built. Through the window, I watched the city doing what it always does, moving forward without asking permission. I realized I was doing the same. On move-out day, I didn't carry a suitcase. I carried a keyring and a folder labeled proof refinance papers, bank letters, a copy of the lease. I handed spare keys to the new tenants, shook hands, and wished them well. Treat the doorframe kindly, I said. It's taller than it looks. When I locked the door from the outside, I didn't feel shut out. I felt like a guard closing a museum for the night lights off, safeguards on, treasures intact. I took a taxi across town to a modest sublet with a tree outside the window and a radio that finds the Yankees every time. The first night there, I heard kids laughing in the courtyard, and for once, it didn't ache. It sounded like proof that life keeps going in every direction, including mine. Ramirez called. How's the new place, Bill? I told him it was quiet. He chuckled. Quiet is loud in a good way. He promised to keep an eye on 12B, and to invite the tenants to the summer rooftop barbecue. Traditions belong to the building, he said, and the building belongs to people who respect them. Before I slept, I wrote a note and taped it inside my new cabinet door where only I would see it. I kept my promise. Under it, I wrote the date. I don't know what Melissa will try next, if anything. Maybe the lobby taught her that not every story can be spun. Maybe Daniel will find his way back to himself. Maybe he won't. The door is open for the man I raised. It is closed to the scheme that tried to replace him. Is independent strength or just another kind of loneliness? Maybe it's neither. Maybe it's the space you guard so that love, when it returns honest, has somewhere to land. And if you've stayed with me this far, thank you. Stories like this are heavy, but sharing them makes them lighter. What would you have done differently? Have you ever had to choose peace over proximity with family? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. If this story meant something to you, please like the video, share it, and subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter. Thank you for watching.